Imagine opening your blinds before sunrise, and, there's a grown man already in your backyard, balancing on your fence, snapping photos of your tomato plants like they're contraband. What would you do if your HOA's self-appointed cop told you your own garden was a threat to community aesthetics? Name's Evan. I grew up on Maple Court, a cul-de-sac where folks used to trade tools more than gossip. My grandpa, Walt Thompson, lives at the corner lot with the white porch swing and the flag that's older than me. He's a 75-year-old veteran with a stubborn streak and a soft spot for tomatoes, because he swears nothing tastes like the ones his mom grew during ration days. He talks gentle, moves slow, and keeps his promises. The man's word is like our HOA. Let's just say the rules are long, but the patience is short. And then there's Doyle Mason. Doyle ain't the president. He ain't on the board. He's just Doyle clipboard, tape measure, phone ready for pictures. A look like he's deputized by the neighborhood gods. He struts up and down Maple Court as if our lawns are a parade he's judging. And the HOA president, Karen Whitfield, smiles like a realtor's billboard and calls it community vigilance. The morning it started. It was a Tuesday, gray light leaking across the fence when Grandpa's rocker creaked on the porch and his coffee steamed like a tiny chimney. I was barely awake, cereal still turning soggy, when he said, "There he goes again." I peeked through the screen. Sure enough, Doyle was scaling the fence, boots on the crossbeam, knees in the lattice, phone pointed down into the garden beds, like he was photographing a crime scene. "Hey," I blurted. Half a shout, half a squeak. Grandpa just lifted a hand. Patience. Let a fool show himself long enough, and he'll write his own ending. Doyle hopped down on our side, paced along the tomatoes, and took a slow pan video. Then he crouched to read the little wooden steak labels Grandpa liked to carve Cherokee purple. Brandywine. Beefsteak. He zoomed in on the trellis. He zoomed in on the compost barrel by the shed. He zoomed in on the rain barrel. Grandpa had painted the same soft sage as the house trim. "Violation," he muttered, loud enough to carry multiple violations. He swung his leg over and climbed back out, waving at nobody, like he just completed a civic duty. The gate latch clicked. His boots crunched down the alley of stones behind the fence. The neighborhood was quiet except for a jaybird squawking in the oak. Grandpa sipped. He said, like a judge who'd seen this case too many times. Truth is, that wasn't the first time. Doyle had been caught twice nosing around near our shed. Once rattling the old brass handle like he expected to find something exciting. Another time, he stuck a yardstick into the lawn to measure grass height. Then took photos of our garbage cans because the lids were propped open by 2 inches. He sent us printed courtesy notices with the HOA logo he pulled off the website and pasted at the top. We told the board. And by board, I mean Karen, the president, because everything in this HOA runs through her like she's the queen bee and the hive, she said, with that smile that never reaches her eyes. "Oh." Doyle's just enthusiastic. "He cares about the neighborhood?" Grandpa asked. "Calm as a pond." "Does he care about keeping his feet off my land?" Karen tilted her head. "Let's all remember the spirit of community." "Walt." Grandpa said nothing for a long beat. Then, spirit's one thing, trespass is another. Now, Grandpa isn't a hothead. He's the opposite. Actually, he fixes wind chimes for widows. He mows the patch for our neighbor, Mr. Ruiz, when his back acts up. He writes checks for the school fundraiser without telling a soul. But he believes in boundaries, the way he believes in sunrise show up true and steady. Or things fall apart. We tried the polite route. We put up fresh no trespassing signs, hand-painted letters in a neat straight line. Weatherproofed. Mounted on both sides of the gate and the fence by the alley. We installed a motion light above the gate. I submitted a formal letter to the board, documenting dates and times, and even included stills from our little doorbell camera that caught Doyle's boots on the top plank. The board filed it. Or maybe it disappeared into the same drawer where complaints go to grow cobwebs. Karen sent a reply that felt like cotton candy, sweet and empty. Thank you for your feedback. We will look into it. Grandpa rocked and thought and drank his black coffee like it was study fuel. 3 days he spent tinkering in the garage, with the door cracked half open. I fetched him tools, and he hummed an old country tune that wanders up and down like a gravel road at dusk. By the 4th day, our wrought iron gate had a new heartbeat. A light little hum you could only hear when you set your hand an inch away. He put up bright yellow signs, printed big enough for a sleepy raccoon to read. Electrified gate. Low voltage. Do not touch. Private property. He tested the lines twice with a handheld meter. He tested again with a strip of aluminum foil on a stick. I ain't hurting nobody, he told me. Just a tap on the wrist to remind folks that keep out means keep out. Is this, okay, I asked. Like. Legal. Grandpa nodded. Slow. We followed the rules that matter. Proper warnings. Low voltage. Private property. Common sense. I ain't giving lectures on law, just guarding what's mine. I mean, yeah, some people are going to argue about any kind of electric anything. I get it. But Grandpa's whole life philosophy could fit on a porch sign. Clear lines. Clear conscience. Right on schedule. Before dawn the next morning, Doyle came prowling. The sun hadn't fully pushed the night off the roofs. The air smelled like wet bark and coffee. I crouched at the window, heart thudding, while Grandpa stayed planted in the rocker, hat brim low. Doyle climbed the little cross pieces, swung onto the inside of the fence, and reached for the gate latch. He wore gloves like he was in a spy movie. The second his palm closed around the bar snap, he jerked back with a yelp that echoed up and down Maple Court. Not a scream. Exactly, more like a startled dog, yip, when it hits an invisible fence. He stumbled, flailed, and landed on the gravel in a sitting heap, blinking up at the gate like it had insulted his family. He scrambled up, checked his fingers, and limped away toward the street, casting glances at the houses, probably praying nobody saw. But windows have a way of collecting eyes when something loud happens before breakfast. Grandpa didn't move. He just exhaled, the tiniest smile tucked into one corner. That, he said softly, was the sound of a lesson. By mid-morning, the whole block was buzzing. Kids on bikes, moms with strollers, dog walkers with leashes tangled like seaweed. Everybody had a version. Doyle got zapped. He shocked himself. He tried to break into Walt's yard, and the fence bit him. It was the kind of gossip that blooms, because the truth is already ridiculous enough. Doyle tried to spin it. Illegal trap, he told anyone who would listen. Dangerous. Reckless. He even told Mr. Ruiz that Grandpa weaponized the gate. Mr. Ruiz lifted an eyebrow so high it ought to have whistled. Weaponized, or did you touch something that had a sign on it? Amigo. By noon, Karen called an emergency meeting. Big word for what is basically a folding chair convention in a beige clubhouse that smells like dry erase markers and lemon cleaner. I went with Grandpa because, honestly, I was worried the room would tilt in Doyle's favor. He's loud. Loud sometimes wins. The table had pitchers of tap water and a plate of cookies that tasted like sugar and dust. Karen sat in the middle. Posture perfect. Pearls shining. Smile set to sales mode. Doyle sat to her right. Arm in a sling he did not need. Because I saw him carry a cooler with that same arm the day before. He pointed at Grandpa like a witness on a courtroom show. This man is endangering the neighborhood. He rigged an electrified device that nearly killed me. Karen steepled her fingers. Walt, would you like to respond? Grandpa unfolded a piece of paper. Slow and neat. No theatrics. Just patience. My gate has clear warning signs. He said. Low voltage. Private property. Touch at your own risk. I don't enter other folks' yards. I expect the same. Karen's smile twitched. Legal or not? This goes against the spirit of community living. Grandpa's voice dropped into that gravel register that makes even noisy rooms get quiet. Regulation is fine. Trespass is not. Boundaries are not unneighborly. Karen. They're how neighbors get along. The room shifted. You could feel it. A woman in a denim jacket spoke first. Tentative. Doyle came into my yard last month. She said. He measured my shrubs. She swallowed. I thought I was the only one. Then Mr. Ruiz lifted a hand. He took pictures of my grandkids' bikes and emailed me that they look like urban blight. My grandkids. Karen. Another neighbor, Mia added. He told me my porch chairs were too colorful. I mean, come on. Doyle's face went splotchy. I was enforcing standards. Karen tapped the gavel plastic. But noisy. Let's maintain order. Grandpa leaned in. Elbows on the table. Eyes steady. Order starts where property lines start. I'm done being polite about a man climbing my fence. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The facts sat in the room like two heavy suitcases. Karen exhaled. Then, read from a binder like she was narrating a bedtime story to an empty crib. The association encourages respectful engagement. Unapproved modifications may be subject to review. Review the trespassing first. Grandpa said. And there was a flicker of something like approval around the room, murmurs. Nods. A low chorus of MHMs. Karen set the binder down. Fine. We'll open an inquiry. Doyle glared. This is a witch hunt. Nah. Mr. Ruiz said. Easy. A witch hunt is when you go looking for problems that ain't there. You did that for months. Compadre. Doyle doesn't handle humiliation like grown folks do. He handles it like a cat in a bath, claws out. Eyes wild. For the next 2 days, he cruised the block in his dented pickup like a vulture, circling something he couldn't quite reach. He idled in front of our house. He idled in front of Mia's. He idled in front of the empty lot and then pretended to check his phone. Grandpa ignored him. Rocked. Sipped coffee. Whittled a tiny tomato from cedar scrap and stuck it in the garden like a joke. When I asked, he said, "You don't meet crazy with crazy. You meet it with documentation." So we adjusted the camera angle by the gate. We added a motion sensor chime by the porch. We lowered the top plank on the inside of the fence, where Doyle liked to perch. So his boots would make more noise if when he tried again, I'm not inviting trouble, Grandpa said. I'm making sure, when it comes, it brings its own witness. On Friday afternoon, Karen herself showed up. Heels clicking on the path like a metronome set to mildly annoyed. She carried a folder and a smile and the smell of a department store perfume that got in your teeth. "Walt," she said from the gate. "Careful not to touch it. We value your contributions to the community." Grandpa stood, hat in hand, like a gentleman greeting a neighbor. "That's so." She opened the folder. "However, there's concern that your electrified gate has signs," Grandpa said, gently. "Big yellow ones. Creates a hostile environment." Grandpa nodded. "Hostility ain't in the wire, Karen. It's in the climbing." She blinked. "Recalibrating. We don't want to escalate this." "We didn't," he said. "He did." She pursed her lips, then switched to a different lane, one I recognized as that polished politeness that's somehow more aggressive than shouting. "If you would consider removing the electrification while we conduct our review, that would be a gesture of goodwill." Grandpa looked out over the garden, the wind stirring the tomato leaves like a slow applause. "Goodwill," he echoed. "I have extended goodwill 13 times with those signs. I am down to good fences." Karen smiled like her cheeks hurt. "We'll be in touch." People started walking by more and slower. The same way folks rubberneck at a fender bender, but try to make it look like they're just admiring the sky. Some offered casserole. Some offered stories. Mia told us Doyle once lifted her welcome mat to photograph a tiny scuff on the paint. "Mr. Ruiz said." Doyle scolded him for letting his granddaughter draw hopscotch on the sidewalk in chalk temporary vandalism. He'd called it Mrs. Patton. She's the type who keeps her hydrangeas so perfect you'd swear they came with instructions. Confessed she had a folder of Doyle's notes going back a year. One of them accused her bird feeder of being an invitation to disorderly wildlife. "Raccoons?" I asked. "Sparrows," she said, deadpan. I tried not to laugh. "Sparrows are the gang leaders now," she smiled, a little surprised at herself. "Apparently." We started a quiet tally. Dates, times, weird phrases Doyle used like he swallowed the thesaurus under nuisance. We weren't building a case so much as building a mirror. Saturday night slid into Sunday with that thick stillness. Only a suburban street knows. After midnight, sprinklers ticking. Air conditioners breathing. A dog collar jingling 2 houses over. I was up too late. Scrolling. When the motion chime went off, one soft ping that doesn't scare you until the second one follows. I moved to the window. Lights off behind me. Hands on the sill. And there he was. Doyle. Flashlight in his left hand. Bolt cutters in his right. He stepped slow, like he'd watched a heist movie and taken notes. He muttered to himself little fragments that floated across the yard: non-compliant, hazard, board authority. Like if he said the words, they'd become true. Grandpa spoke from the porch without standing. "Watch this, kid," he whispered. And his voice had that calm that's either bravery or a lifetime of dealing with nonsense. Doyle set the cutters on the bottom wire and squeezed. Grandpa pressed a small remote with his thumb. The wire hummed. Soft, but certain. Doyle's arm stiffened. His eyes went wide. And a sound came out of him that wasn't pain so much as surprise dressed up like outrage. He dropped the cutters, stumbled back, and fell into the muddy strip near the lilies. Grandpa lifted his phone, the camera already recording every step. Every curse. The flashlight beam jittering like a scared moth. The whole thing captured in the flat honesty of high definition. Attempted murder, Doyle shouted, scrambling to his feet. He's trying to kill me now. Look, words thrown in a panic ain't always the words people mean. But Doyle had a talent for saying the loudest possible thing first. He fumbled for his own phone. Jabbed 3 digits. And the neighborhood filled with the color of trouble. Red and blue washing the oaks and the siding and the driveway like a low tide of chaos. 2 cruisers rolled up. Tires quiet on the asphalt. Lights orchestrated, but sirens cut. Officers stepped out. Hands easy, but ready. They looked at the gate. They looked at Doyle, mud on his jeans. Flashlight still on. The cutters lying where he dropped them. They looked at Grandpa seated. Hat, brim, low. Phone in hand. Coffee cooling beside him. Sir. The taller one said to Grandpa. Is there an active electric device on that gate? Yes. Grandpa answered. Even. Warnings posted. Low voltage. He slid the laminated sheet. He's old school. He laminates everything across the porch table and handed over his phone. The video played Doyle entering the yard. Cutting. Yelping. Yelling. The shorter officer picked up the bolt cutters with 2 fingers, like someone had left a fish on the carpet. These yours? He asked Doyle. I mean... No. Well... Yes. They're my look. That's not the point. He tried to electrocute me. At midnight, the tall officer asked. While you were on his property, Doyle tugged at his shirt collar. I was conducting an inspection for the association. At midnight with bolt cutters, the shorter officer sounded like he had been practicing deadpan for years. There's rules, and there's common sense. When the two line up, even a noisy night gets simple. The officers did their job. They were professional, calm. One of them addressed Grandpa as Sir twice more than needed. Which is how you know they recognized a man who'd earned a little respect without announcing it. As for Doyle, he faced the kind of consequences you face. When you climb a fence, you were told not to climb. At an hour, you weren't invited. With a tool you can't explain, he sat on the curb a long time, breathing hard, while the neighborhood watched from shadowed windows. Someone applauded once, just 2 claps, then stopped. Embarrassed and satisfied all at once. If you think the story ended there, you're new to neighborhoods. Monday morning. The HOA Facebook group lit up like a fuse line. Karen posted a soothing paragraph about working together and respecting processes. Mia replied with a screenshot of Doyle's midnight adventure. Timestamp and all. Mr. Ruiz commented with a single chili pepper emoji and 3 clapping hands. Mrs. Patton posted a photo of sparrows with tiny caption hats, disorderly wildlife. Reporting for duty. Doyle chimed in on his own. Of course. He wrote a block of text that read like a mix of legal thriller and diary entry, insisting he acted under implied authority. He claimed Grandpa's gate was a hazardous instrumentality. Word salad. Mayonnaise thick. Karen turned off comments after 12 minutes. Then she posted an official notice that the board would meet in executive session to evaluate safety concerns. The comments stayed off. The whispers got louder. Tuesday evening. A cluster gathered at the end of our driveway, neighbors with lawn chairs and lemonade, like it was a summer concert. Grandpa didn't hold court. He sat among them. Same as always. Folks told stories years' worth in a circle. The words were soft. Like people finally letting out a breath they'd held too long. Doyle told my son his chalk dragon violated property values. Mia said. My kid cried, and then wiped it off with his sleeve. Doyle measured my grass with a ruler. Mr. Ruiz said, and told me it was 7/8 of an inch above tolerance. 7/8. Doyle stared at my wind chimes and said they were auditory litter. Mrs. By dear, Patton added. I asked if he wanted to borrow my ladder to take them down. He said he does not climb other people's ladders. The irony. I swear, we laughed. A tired kind of laugh that cleans a body out. Grandpa listened. Then he said, a neighborhood ain't a museum. It's a place where people live. Lawns should be neat. Fine. But kids draw dragons. Birds eat. Wind chimes sing on breezes. That's living. He cleared his throat small, like he was embarrassed to take up space, and added, tell your stories to the board. Not to burn it down. To fix it. Karen must have felt the ground moving, because she called a formal town hall for Thursday. She booked the big room at the community center, where they set up rows of plastic chairs and a screen nobody uses because the HDMI cable is always missing. She printed an agenda in a font that says, I went to a seminar. She started with a speech. Karen can talk. I'll give her that. She talked about shared values and consistent standards and protecting property values like we were a stock portfolio with grass. Then, in a voice that was supposed to be gentle but came out like polished ice, she said, we must consider whether unapproved electrification is appropriate in a family neighborhood. Grandpa stood. He didn't bring notes. He brought decades. Appropriate, he said, and let the word hang. Appropriate is not climbing a fence with cutters at midnight. Appropriate is reading a sign and respecting it. A murmur. Warmer now. People were ready to speak. One by one. They did soft and firm and, you know, human. And Karen, credit where it's due, let them. The stories stacked like bricks in a wall. Not angry. Solid. When it circled back to Karen, she folded her hands. I hear you, she said. I also hear the risk. She paused there like she had rehearsed it. Until our review is complete, I'm asking Mr. Deck Thompson Walt to de-energize the gate as a gesture of community good faith. Grandpa considered. He is not spiteful. He is careful. After a long 10 seconds, he said, I'll honor that for 7 days. Signs stay. Cameras stay. Good faith goes both ways. The board keeps Doyle off my property. Not a toe. Karen nodded. Agreed. Doyle opened his mouth. Karen didn't look his way. He closed it again. 7 days of calm is a luxury you don't notice until you've lived with an ache. The first day, nothing. The second, a squirrel knocked a tomato and I overreacted. Then laughed at myself. The third, Mia's kid drew a dragon twice as big. And nobody said a word. On the fourth, Mr. Ruiz brought over empanadas so good, Grandpa leaned back and made a sound I had never heard. Somewhere between a sigh and a prayer. On the 5th day, Karen emailed an update that read like it had been massaged by 3 different people. We are evaluating concerns. Please refrain from speculation. It made everything feel soft and official. On the 6th, Doyle idled down the street twice, but didn't stop. Maybe he learned. Maybe he simmered. Maybe both. On the 7th day, Grandpa sat in the rocker and watched the sun come up pink and peach over the roofs. He turned the gate back on at noon. An agreement kept. He said. And we keep the rest of our agreements by being clear. That afternoon, a letter arrived with the HOA logo, like a stamp of solemnity. Karen's signature sat under a paragraph of careful language. The board would issue a formal censure of unauthorized enforcement activities by non-board members. Effective immediately. Home inspections would be limited to daylight hours, and only with prior notice. Trespassing by any person would be referred to the proper authorities. We encourage all residents to maintain open communication with respect for property boundaries. It wasn't fireworks. It was a fence. In words. Good enough. Grandpa tapped the letter with a fingernail. We could have had this a year ago, he said. Not unkind. But sometimes people need a picture to understand a sentence. Doyle didn't take the censure like a cute arrest. He took it like a dare. 2 nights after the letter, there was a knock on the clubhouse door at nearly midnight. Karen had been there late with the treasurer, counting receipts after a community yard sale. She told us later over lemonade on our porch. Eyes a little tired that when she opened the door, Doyle stood there with a stack of printouts from the HOA website and a pen like a sword. I demand a hearing, he said. It's midnight. Doyle, she replied. I was humiliated, he said. You turned them against me. Karen folded her arms. You turned them against you. He left. But not in peace. Not yet. Grandpa told me stories that week, the kind he doesn't usually share. About walking fence lines on his daddy's farm. Fixing posts after storms. Learning that if you patch a boundary with twine instead of cedar, it will hold just long enough for a bull to find it. About a night in a faraway place where he guarded a gate with nothing but a flashlight and a pocket Bible. Because even a small barrier, when defended with calm, can turn chaos into order. I don't like wires, he admitted. I like words. But when words don't work, you build a thing that is as clear as a word. Not to hurt. To say here and have here mean something. I nodded. You don't argue with a man who has lived long enough to name his reasons. You already know what happened next. Because certain stories walk toward their endings, the same way rain walks down a roofline, inevitable. Not rushed. Another midnight. Another shadow. Another set of cutters. This time, new. The handles, still navy clean, like they'd come off a hardware store hook an hour earlier. The chime pinged. I stood. Grandpa stood. 2. We didn't speak. Doyle stepped toward the gate, with a look that was equal parts triumph and hunger. He didn't read the signs. He didn't care. He set the blades. Grandpa pressed the remote. Steady. The wire hummed its small hum. Doyle stiffened, then staggered back. And this time, he cursed so loud it woke Mrs. Patton's cat, which yowled like a violin being tuned by a toddler. Doyle grabbed his phone, dialed the numbers he had dialed before, and performed the same outrage with a little less conviction. The officers arrived. Calm again. Professional again. They watched the new video angle. They handled the new cutters with the same 2-finger delicacy. They looked at Doyle like he was a rerun of a show that never changes. Doyle left the street that night, not in his truck, but in the back of a cruiser. Not forever. Just long enough for the night to exhale. People brought pie. I don't know why crises lead to pie. But they do. Pecan. Lemon chess. Apple with a braided crust. Mia's kid drew a dragon on the sidewalk that breathed hearts instead of fire. And Mr. Ruiz took a picture and said it was the best mural our street had ever had. Mrs. Patton hung a second set of wind chimes in an act of tiny rebellion and named them both Auditory Litter 1 and 2. Karen showed up with lemonade again, the store-bought kind with pulp that looks like somebody shook a snow globe. She stood at the gate, careful, respectful, and said, "I should have stepped in sooner." Grandpa shook his head. "You stepped in when you learned to. That's how most of us do." She looked up at the signs. "You gonna keep it on until folks stop thinking my yard is an open house," he said. And then, softer, "I like sleeping." Karen half smiled. Fair. 2 weeks later, the board adopted a set of policies that read less like a rule book and more like an agreement between neighbors. No inspections without notice. No photo documentation beyond the sidewalk line unless invited. All enforcement actions handled by actual board members. In daylight. With a second person present, not Doyle. Not volunteers who deputize themselves. Complaints about trespass forwarded to the proper folks. Basic stuff. Obvious once you say it out loud. Powerful once you put it in ink. Karen asked Grandpa to speak at the meeting where they voted. And he did. "You can't control what people do with power," he said. "But you can control how much power they're handed without asking for it." He paused there. Then added, "And you can teach kids to draw dragons that don't scare anybody." Laughter rolled like a warm wave. Doyle's name was not on the agenda. His keys to the clubhouse were collected quietly. Finally. The sling disappeared from his arm the same day. The season turns, tomatoes ripen when they're ready. Not when you yell at them. Grandpa's vines went from green to blush, to the kind of deep red that looks like it contains sunset. He sliced them thick, salted them light, and put them on buttered toast. I swear the house held its breath during those first bites. Neighbors came by for a slice. Kids watered. Dogs sniffed. The wind chimes earned their keep. If you walked down Maple Court at dusk, you could hear a soft chorus, metal tongues tapping. Leaves whispering. A basketball thump 3 driveways over. Laughter that comes from people who know they're safe. Doyle, he kept to himself. I saw him once, replacing the mailbox post he'd measured on other people's lots for years. He kept his eyes down and his tape measure in his pocket. I don't hate the man. I don't even think he's a villain in his own head. Some folks mistake control for care. They get lost between the lines of a rule book and forget why the lines are there. Near the end of summer, Karen stopped by at twilight, when the sky goes lavender and porches look like stage sets. She didn't bring a folder. She brought a question. "Walt," she said, "how do we enforce without becoming what we fear?" Grandpa thought. He took his time, because good answers are never in a hurry. Finally he said, "Start with please. Use thank you as currency. Expect adults to act like adults. When they don't, document. When they still don't, call people whose job it is. Never climb a fence that isn't yours." Karen nodded. "I can do that." She turned to leave, then looked back. "Do you hate me for not stopping him sooner?" Grandpa smiled. "Small. Hate takes too much space. I got tomatoes to grow." We watched her walk away. Heels clicking, softer than before. The air smelled like basil and cut grass. Somewhere down the block, Mr. Ruiz laughed so loud you could hear the joy in it. One night on the porch, he said, "Evan, there's people who think rules are a hammer. They forget hammers build houses before they ever tore one down. Use tools right. Use them gentle first." He took off his hat, rubbed the spot where it creases above his brow, and added, half to himself, "We ain't better because we win. We're better when we don't have to." I said. You ever gonna turn that gate off? He smiled. Someday. When the lesson sticks. When the signs mean what they say. He closed his eyes for a minute, like he was listening to the wind choose which leaves to move. So, imagine paying dues year after year, just to be told your tomatoes, your wind chimes, your kid's chalk dragon, your life ain't tidy enough for a brochure. Imagine a neighbor climbing your fence at midnight with cutters, then calling you the danger when the fence says hello back. What would you do? Would you lay down and let the clipboard rule your porch? Or, sorry, would you draw a line and ask folks to respect it? I ain't selling revenge here. I'm telling you about boundaries and how they keep the peace better than 1,000 speeches. Our street didn't get better because Doyle got embarrassed. It got better because people told the truth out loud and then wrote it down so tomorrow wouldn't forget. If you've got a story like ours, one that starts with a man on a fence and ends with neighbors on chairs, drop it in the comments. What would you do if your HOA tried to micromanage your memories? Anybody else have a Karen who smiles while the Doyle in your neighborhood does the sneaking? Talk to me. Talk to each other. That's how a cul-de-sac turns back into a community.